AITA for leaving my wife to deal with the debt after she cheated and got scammed? I'm writing this as a way to put it all behind me, once and for all. I'm 33 now, and my ex-wife, who's 3 years younger, still tries to insert herself into my life every chance she gets. Let's call her Darcy. I'm over it, and this is my way of putting it out there once and for all. Once I post this, I plan on filing a restraining order in court. I just need to move on and be done with her harassing me and showing up whenever she pleases. Darcy and I met a few years ago while working remotely on a branding project. My job was to design the profiles for everyone involved. So, I ended up privately messaging her to send her the finished design I had done for her. She really liked it, complimented my work, and was very friendly from the start. So naturally, we kept talking. One day, out of the blue, she called to let me know she was coming to my city for work and that we should meet up. I was single at the time, and I wasn't expecting anything serious, but I was curious about what I had seen in her pictures. She was attractive, and I thought it would be nice to meet her in person. Ultimately, I wasn't necessarily looking for a relationship, but if it happened, I wouldn't mind. She picked a restaurant, and our conversations were as warm and friendly as they had been in messages. Not long after, we started dating. It happened naturally. One of those fun nights when she was in town, I asked her to be my girlfriend. She said yes, and just like that, we were officially together. After dating for a little over a year, we decided to get married. I should add that her family, especially her mother and sisters, did not like me. They accepted the marriage, but in many ways, they made it clear I was too poor for their daughter. These people were only slightly better off financially than I was, but somehow felt financially superior. Things were going well. Darcy moved permanently to my city, and I was still working as a designer, but I had landed a better-paying job. Also, since we were both in the same industry, we always recommended each other. It took a while to have a baby, and when it finally happened, it was the happiest moment of our marriage. The baby and Darcy were fine for about 5 months, but, unfortunately, Darcy suffered a miscarriage. I work remotely, so I was home when it happened. She was getting ready to leave for work when all of a sudden she screamed in pain. I tried to comfort her, but I noticed the blood. Actually, I think we both saw it at the same time, because she immediately started crying. I panicked and called 911 right away. At the hospital, the doctors told us she'd had a miscarriage. They said it was likely due to her overexerting herself at work, and it was really sad for both of us. But I reassured her that we'd have more babies in the future. However, it never happened, and after a while, she seemed to be back to her old self again. I tried to do everything I could to make things easier for her after that. I bought her a new car, and we moved to a bigger apartment. I even paid to have a professional website built for her, which I designed myself, to help her with her work. I also shared the expenses for her assistant to lessen her workload. For a while, it seemed like we were back on track. Things were good again. Looking back, I'm honestly grateful we didn't have any kids while we were married. I know that sounds bad, especially considering she had a miscarriage, but I can't help but think it would have made everything so much harder if we had a kid. I would have been too attached, and that would have prevented me from doing what I eventually had to do. I wouldn't have wanted to hurt the mother of my child, and that would have changed everything. To be completely honest in this account, I'll admit something about myself. I have a temper. I've always been that way, and Darcy knew this from the beginning. No, my temper wasn't the cause of the problems that eventually surfaced. The real issue was that she wanted me to feel like it wasn't about compromise or being a team anymore. She just needed to assert her independence in a way that felt like she was trying to prove something. And that's where it all started to fall apart. At first, nothing too serious, but out of the blue, Darcy started packing her bags and going to her family's house whenever we argued. That behavior was new. The first time it happened, I assumed I had really upset her, since she'd never done anything like that before. I thought maybe I pushed her too far, so, of course, I called her and apologized, practically begging her to come home. And she did, but looking back now, what I should have been concerned about at the time was the fact that her family didn't try to send her back. They didn't even ask what had happened. It was as if they were okay with her just leaving. They didn't like me, so in a way, it made sense. And, surprise, surprise, it happened again. This time it was worse. Her brothers called me yelling at me, telling me I wasn't treating their sister right. They said that I was the cause of her miscarriage. That hurt like hell. They made me look like a deadbeat their sister was chained to. At that point, I was still in love, so the thought of divorce wasn't even crossing my mind. I just thought we'd work it out like we always did. But one day, during one of our arguments, she pushed me so hard that, for the first time, I ended up locking her out. I just couldn't deal with it anymore. Naturally, she ran back to her family, but this time, they took it further. They took her to the police, trying to make it look like I had abused her. The whole thing turned into a giant mess. My parents had to get involved, and before I knew it, we were in couples therapy. Ironically, it actually worked. Her constant back and forth trips stopped, and her family stopped interfering in our relationship. This was 5 years into our marriage, and things started to feel like they did in the beginning, when we'd just started dating. But I should have known better. I mean, anyone who would allow their family and the police to spread the false narrative that I was an abuser, even if they didn't pursue the allegations, was definitely someone I should have been wary of. But, as I said before, love has a way of clouding your judgment. So, every now and then, I like to go out and work from different locations. I'd pick a spot with buy some food and maybe do a little sightseeing. Just something different from the usual. It was during one of these outings that I saw her. I told myself it must be a mistake. I thought it was someone who looked like her or dressed like her. My mind tried to make sense of it, but something felt off. So I followed her. I knew she had an office she rented for her work, but it wasn't anywhere near where I was at that moment, and I didn't know if she was there to meet someone or if she had some event. I followed her to a restaurant, and I saw her meet with a man I'd never seen before. She was very smiley with him, but it didn't look suspicious, though I needed to continue observing. I put on a baseball cap and walked into the restaurant hoping she wouldn't recognize me. I ordered a drink and sat in the back observing them. I stayed long enough to see her say goodbye and leave while he stayed behind. At that moment, I decided to try and get some information from him. I walked over and made a comment like, "You have a beautiful woman." And to my absolute shock, he responded with, "Yeah, that's my girlfriend." My mind went blank. I was so stunned I couldn't hear anything else he said. I found myself walking back like, I got in my car like, I drove home like, everything after that was a blur. I went straight home, showered, had a few too many glasses of wine, and fell asleep, until I was woken up for dinner. When I asked her how her day went, she didn't mention meeting with anyone. The next few days were rough. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. I knew I had to find out more about that guy. I checked her phone. She had been protective of it lately, but I had my ways of accessing it. I saw she was frequently calling a contact named Diego. So, I wrote down the number and searched that name in her social media accounts. I then sent the profiles to my phone and the screenshots of their conversations as well. What I discovered was that he constantly posted pictures of himself on vacation, driving expensive cars, and living what seemed like a luxurious lifestyle, but something didn't add up. At that point, I knew I needed help. So I passed his phone number and social media information to a coworker who was into cybersecurity. I asked him to investigate everything he could about this guy. What he found was very interesting. Diego was a con artist. He had a long history of scamming women, living off their money, and creating a false image of a wealthy businessman. That image made it easier for him to scam more women. One of the older pictures he had on his Facebook page had been posted in a Twitter thread calling him out and warning other women. It wasn't even clear if Diego was his real name. Not only was she cheating on me, but she was doing it with a scammer. I became determined to ruin his life from the inside, and the best way to do it was to make sure she was caught in her own lies. I first needed to shift her attention away from me so I could operate without raising suspicion. I subtly encouraged her growing obsession with Diego, pretending to be more distant and distracted whenever she complained about me or hinted at being unhappy. I played the role of someone who was even considering leaving. At first, this made her more reckless, eager to solidify her future with Diego, who was feeding her all kinds of fantasies about the dream life they were going to have together, at least, according to the screenshots I had. And not just her family was also involved. To them, Diego was money, and that's what they wanted for their daughter. This time, my friend went much deeper into Diego's social media history. It became clear that Diego was involved in shady dealings. He found old accounts tied to Diego's email address, and within them were multiple complaints from women across the country. These women talked about how Diego had scammed them with investments into ventures that didn't exist. They had filed civil lawsuits, and the pattern was undeniable. This was the opportunity one needed. I didn't need to bring Darcy down myself. I just had to nudge her a little further into Diego's mess and wait for it all to blow up. This is where patience and strategy came in. Like I said, I started playing dumb. I pretended to be stressed with work, acting distant, as if I wasn't even paying attention to what Darcy was doing. I didn't argue with her anymore. I barely interacted. This pushed her right into Diego's arms, making her feel more justified in spending more time, and most importantly, more money, on whatever he was promising her. He was her new fantasy life, and I was the guy she couldn't wait to leave behind. At this point, Darcy had no clue that I knew about Diego, and I made sure. She started making investments with Diego. My almost daily investigations showed Darcy began taking out loans in her name. She thought she was being clever, believing Diego's business would pan out and everything would be all right. A few months passed, but eventually, Darcy started noticing cracks in Diego's stories. She started asking questions, trying to understand why her investments weren't paying off, why things weren't moving forward, or why he wasn't pushing for marriage. It wasn't long before Diego did his disappearing act. He ghosted her for weeks, and when she tried to track him down, he was nowhere to be found, probably off looking for his next victim. The best part is, by the time she realized what had happened, her savings were almost depleted. She couldn't even afford to pay the loans she'd taken out to give to him. Thank goodness, all my money wasn't in the joint account. I don't know when it finally clicked for her that Diego was never coming back and that her entire financial investment was gone. All I remember is the day she came to me and said we needed to talk. When I gave her my attention, she started crying and attempted to ask for my help, telling me everything that happened with Diego, omitting, of course, the infidelity part. You have friends in tech who can figure how, or find information, right? She said. Shut up. For someone who didn't know about the infidelity, her story was touching, but I wasn't having it. That's when I dropped the bomb. I had been tracking everything. I had screenshots of her messages with Diego, copies of her financial transactions, and a complete timeline of when she started taking money out of our accounts. To top it all off, I gave her the divorce papers to sign. This woman became hysterical. She started yelling and throwing herself all over the place. At one point, I had to grab her by her shoulders and shake her to try and snap her out of whatever fit she was throwing. There was no way the neighbors' attention wasn't called at that point. The last thing I needed was for any of them to call the cops and for her to tell them I had abused her. Then she knelt down, begging me. She started acting as if she was about to have a mental breakdown. I'm not going to lie, I was very concerned, and I had to call her friend to come over ASAP. When her friend arrived, she learned what happened, packed some things, and took Darcy with her. As terrifying as it was, it didn't mean I was going to forgive her. After a few days, Darcy started calling me, and when I couldn't take the annoyance anymore, I blocked her, but not before telling her that any information she wanted to relay to me had to go through my lawyer. She tried coming over to the house, but I let her know that if she tried that again, I would involve the police. I guess she went home after that, because I started receiving calls from her family, but I blocked them too. We had to go to court because she and her family weren't willing to settle peacefully. It was messy, because in the middle of the case it didn't look like I was going to get a good side of the split. But luckily and ultimately, the divorce process was karma in action. First, thanks to us not having kids, thank goodness, custody wasn't an issue. But the financial side, that's where things got interesting. In most states, including mine, marital assets are divided equitably in a divorce. That doesn't necessarily mean 50-50, but whatever's fair given the circumstances. I knew Darcy had started siphoning money from our joint account, and because I didn't want her to suspect anything, it gradually transitioned to putting her own personal savings into Diego's fake ventures. I made sure her own money, leaving her with nothing but debt. She shouldn't have to suffer because of that. I hired a good, expensive lawyer, and we laid everything out on the table. The loan she had taken out in her name, the money she had sent Diego, and overall, her financial irresponsibility. The court had no sympathy for her financial woes. In fact, they ruled that she was solely responsible for her own debt. She tried to argue that she had been manipulated by Diego, but the judge didn't care. It wasn't a criminal case, it was a divorce, and in divorce court, the only thing that mattered was how the assets and debts were divided. Thanks to my lawyer's expertise, I came out clean. No spousal support, no debt division, nothing. Darcy, on the other hand, had to deal with the mess she created. The judge ordered that she repay the loan she had taken out in her name, and since her personal savings were drained, she was left with nothing but a pile of debt and a ruined credit score, neither Diego nor I. The best part of it all is that I didn't have to do anything illegal or shady to get my revenge. It was all above board. I simply let her dig her own grave, and then I made sure she couldn't climb out of it legally. She was trapped by her own bad decisions, and there was nothing she could do about it. After the divorce, she tried contacting me one too many times, probably thinking she could sweet-talk her way back into my good graces, using different numbers and mediums. I would block her, and she'd reach out to me through a new account or number. That's why I will be filing a restraining order, citing her continuous harassment, and I'm confident I will get it. If she attempts to contact me or shows up unannounced, she will be violating the order, and that's a whole new legal headache for her. Anyway, that's how I handled it. It wasn't dramatic or violent. It was meticulous, calculated, and legal. I let Darcy's own destroy her, and now I can finally move on with my life. She's still out there, drowning in debt and chasing after a guy that's long gone. And I'm good, ready to put all of this behind me, once and for all. So yeah, if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, Hollywood-style revenge isn't always the answer. Just be smart, document everything, and let the legal system do the heavy lifting. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.